What's up, Pitt fans? Welcome back to another Pitt mailbag here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. He is Chris Carter. I am Noah Hiles. We are your Pitt beat reporters for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And as always, we are here to answer your questions for the mailbag. Chris, very eventful week as always for the Panthers. Lost at Cameron Indoor Stadium Wednesday night in an electric atmosphere that I was lucky enough to cover. And then they get the road win Saturday over Georgia Tech. Nothing really special about the victory other than it snapped a 2-game losing skid that they were on in ACC competition. Back in the win column. Any thoughts? Just anything before we get started here?
Just that I think that this is, there's people who wanted to be too really down about the Duke loss, but, no, when we talked about that gauntlet of 4 games, we said the goal for this team would be to win 2 out of the 4 games against North Carolina, Virginia, Clemson, and Duke. And they did that. And they were really close to getting 3 with the game against Clemson. And if a couple things go their way in the last 8 minutes, maybe they do it against Duke. But I think this Pitt team is in a really good place with where they are and what they could still do with this season.
So, yeah, I think, you bring up the Clemson loss and the Duke loss and where this team is. I think the number one issue at hand right now when it comes to Pitt is the front court, the guys down low. What's going to be done with the absence of John Hugley, which, as we found out this weekend, is going to be a permanent thing. John Hugley will not be returning this season. He announced on social media on Saturday at noon. Quick little peek behind the curtain there. Chris was on vacation. I was on a Ferris wheel in downtown Atlanta when that news broke. So you texted me. You were like, "Did you see this?" I said, "I did not. I'm looking. I'm not able to write right now." And great teammate award goes to Carter there for taking care of that and getting that story published. But Chris, let's talk about Hugley's departure or temporary absence.
What I was doing on my
vacation.
Vacation.
There you go. But let's talk about Hugley being gone for the remainder of the year and if Pitt will be able to hold up. I'll start with your thoughts.
They've held up this far without him.
Right.
Right. And again, that's not to say that John coming back wouldn't have been a nice way to boost the team and get them some inside presence. So like the thick presence that they've been missing. But I mean, Federico has been an asset to this team. He's been that guy underneath, and I think we've seen the willingness of the rest of the team to rebound and to help in that department. And to me, that's a huge part of this is can they keep all pitching in? Because I do think, and we started to see this with the minutes from guys like Nate Santos, guys like the Twins. They've increased, and Jeff Capel's trying to give those guys more floor time, and I think that's all a big part of. He needs to keep Blake Hinson fresh. He needs to keep Federico fresh, and in the final 10 minutes of a game, they need those guys to not be tired and to still be boxing out. Because I do think there's sometimes where you see Blake, he's chucking up the threes, and he might be doing that, but like on the little things like boxing out and keeping teams, I think against Duke. You saw him look a little gassed. And That's not to say that he was terrible and he was lazy. It's just when you're playing so many minutes and the team is leaning on you so much, these things happen. It happens in all sports. The Steelers dealt with it when their defense started off the year red hot against the Bengals. And then when they were out there for 100 plays and then we're out there for like 80 plays and another 80 plays, they got tired. And you saw the impact on them. It's the same thing in basketball. You see that there's not a lot of depth at certain areas, like the front court of proven guys that this team can rely on. There's going to be those moments, but I think seeing Nate Santos, seeing Guillermo Diaz Graham and Jorge Diaz Graham, if you see those guys getting pushed forward more, it's a good sign that they're going to be ready there, and they don't need to be dominant. Just don't be liabilities, and make it so Pitt's strength, its backcourt, can still be the advantage that gets them over the top.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions about the Pitt backcourt for this episode, especially about the Twins, who we're going to talk about a lot here in the next couple questions. But I think the key with the front court here, I called it the backcourt earlier, front court is, and this really just goes with the bench with the exception of Nike. You want to play the guys like the Nate Santoses, the Twins. You want to give them minutes when you choose to give them minutes, not because you have to give them minutes. When we see one of the Twins check in the game or sometimes Nate Santos even, early in the first half, it's normally because Blake Hinson's in foul trouble, or Federico's in foul trouble, or someone maybe twisted an ankle or something like that. And it's in those situations where they're playing more than than the staff would really like them to. That's where you're messing with fire there. And obviously Pitt has no control over those situations, because if they did, they wouldn't be in them. But for things like foul trouble and everything, I mean, that's something I talked with Fetty about Saturday after the Georgia Tech game, and just learning how to play smart and toe that line between being aggressive and being kind of careless on the defensive end, and knowing that, hey, I'm our key guy down here. And while, while Jorge and Guillermo are only a year younger than me, physically, they're not ready to play 20 minutes a game in this league yet. And so, it's going to take time figuring that out, but that's the key, is avoiding foul trouble and avoiding situations where you have to push the limit with the young guys on the bench. But we'll keep it moving here. Because Dana wants to know, can either of the Twins make a significant step up to help down low, or do they just need a season to bulk up? And I think that's the main talking point with these two players. I think a lot of people who watch them play clearly can see they have talent. I mean, they came over from Spain to IMG Academy, which is a factory of Division I talent in like every sport really you can think of. And I think there is promise there, but they were both entering this year looked at as long-term investments, guys who probably weren't going to get a lot of time as freshmen, because you thought Hugley would be here. You thought they'd have depth in other areas with Johnson and Jeffress, where maybe you could give Blake a spell and use him more in the front court than what you're really having to do right now, or less in the front court, I should say. But, they're going to have to make some sort of impact if Pitt wants to remain competitive, because the reality is Fetty can't play 40 minutes a game. And it's better if both of them do play, because you don't put pressure on one of their shoulders if both of them can get 5 to 10 minutes, as opposed to only one of them getting 10 to 15.
No, I agree with that. But I also think that these guys, will be nice for them to bulk up in future years. I think the best ways that they can do things right now is to just still get to your spots. And Nate Santos kind of talked about this with why he's been a bigger asset, especially on defense, is because he's learning on where to be to support his teammates at the right time. One thing that Federico has done very well is when there's a high screen from his man, he is helping. He's flashing out. He's taking away a guy. And then as soon as his man recovers, as soon as like the teammate that he's helping recovers, Greg Elliott, Nike Sabande, Jamarius Burton, whoever, he is getting back in position, and you have the tiniest window, if you're the player with the ball, to get it to the man that Federico left before he's back in position to swat it away. He has been so good. He has taken away so many pick and rolls this year, and that's not about bulk. That's not about strength. That's about smart feet, good smart play, good feet, quick reactions, and sticking to your man and being disciplined. That takes work. That takes time. And I think we've seen the Twins do that more over the past couple games. And if they continue to do that, and again, you're going to have your days where the Armando Baycots of the conference are going to just move and dunk on you. Like, right. they're going to bully you. But if you keep getting your feet in position, I think they're going to learn how to draw a charge out of that situation. Like, if you're able to keep them out of the semicircle, you're going to get some plays like that. And it's all about work, footwork, and things that they can do right now.
And to build upon that, Chris, I think something that they have going for them, both the Twins, same with Fetty, is length. If you can get in the right position, I'm pretty sure all three of their wingspans are longer than they are vertically, as height-wise. And they're all close to 7 feet tall. One of them is. And so with that being established, like you said, where there's that fraction of a second where you got to get that entry pass in off the pick and roll. When you have a guy who's super long in the front court, breaking up that screen and getting back, if he's in the right position, your genetics should allow you to tip that pass. And at the very least, break up something that gets the ball into the paint. And on a good note, create a steal and a transition bucket on the other end. So I think they have the ability to create more of an impact. There are certain challenges, like you just said, that they're going to face this year that they're just not equipped to handle properly. They're not going to do well against a Hunter Dickinson or an Armando Bacot or any other great big that we see that can really just get the ball down on the block and bully them. They're just not ready. Yeah, they're going to need more time in the gym, but their skill set allows them to do other things. And I think that if they're in the right position and they just play the game accordingly, they can provide plus value moving forward. So on the continued note of the Twins, Dave wants to know, Jorge Diaz Graham got most of the playing time over Guillermo early in the season. Is that just a product of lack of depth at the 4 and 5 spots and Nike and Santos eating up most of the time of the guard and wing minutes? Well, Dave, and Carter actually has the numbers in front of him. The playing time between the Twins has been interesting because one started the year. I believe it was Jorge started the season, right? Yes. Getting the majority of the looks. And as someone who's been to every game this year, I still have trouble mixing them up.
It's not easy.
Yes. And I apologize because they are their own people, but like they look exactly the same and they play very similar. And when you're writing and tweeting and watching a million things, you just look up and you're like, okay, which one was that? Which is the line that Chris and I have said to each other numerous times throughout the season. Which one just don't
Which one just scored?
We don't know. Which one has more fouls? But anyway, their playing time has fluctuated. Jorge started the season getting more minutes. Guillermo has been the guy who's been getting more opportunities lately, and I think that's good. That both of them are they're not relied on as a group package. You rarely see them both on the floor at the same time. And I think it's good for both to get their own experiences against different opponents. So that way, late in the season, both of them have those collective learning moments that they can build off of when they're needed. Because there's going to come a time in an important game in February or March where one of the Diaz Graham twins is going to have to play key minutes. That's just how college basketball works. And it's good that they both can get these experiences throughout the entire year.
Absolutely. And to go over those numbers, Jorge still has more minutes on the season with 179 to Guillermo's 121. But much of that is started to flip when in the Panthers non-conference schedule, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games where he played more 10 or more minutes in a game. So he played more than he played more than a quarter of basketball. In the non-conference schedule, there were only 3 such games for Guillermo. But since they've started playing in the ACC, there have been 2 such games for Guillermo versus 1 such game for Jorge. And Jorge only played 1 minute against Clemson, didn't play against Duke, and didn't play against Georgia Tech. Yep. So in those games, Guillermo played 12 minutes against Clemson, 13 minutes against Duke, 5 minutes against Georgia Tech. So I don't think there's a cemented plan there. I think it's just week to week, who's practicing better, who's getting certain things. Jeff told us from the jump, Jorge, he's the guy right now. He's the guy that's kind of fit for that position, fit to play right now. He's got the more talent, but Guillermo has a lot of talents to him as well. And I think Pitt's going to be trying to using Guillermo, like you said, more like just a really tall wing guy who's going to be out there. Jorge, similarly, but I think Jorge, they want him to kind of supplement, Fetty a bit more. But both of these guys, like you said, I think these next few games are going to be very important for them because, they got Louisville coming up. Pitt should handle Louisville. That's a terrible team. They lost to a community college team in preseason. Like when Pitt was beaten up on Gannon and people were like, oh, well, you beat up on Gannon, congratulations. Louisville is losing to the Gannons. Like that's how bad.
The first team they lost to this year doesn't dribble the basketball. I don't know if you've seen them play. I forget the name of the school, but they're like a heavy analytics program. They refuse to dribble the basketball. It's just pass. It's really cool. Sorry to throw you off track there. Just wanted to insert that.
That's fine. Point being, Louisville stinks. This is a chance for Pitt to run up the score and get these guys in the court and say, hey, let's run some offense. Let's run some defense when there's transition plays. Can you create transition plays? And I think we've seen moments where smart defense, good pokes in to help with steals, good rebounds, good feeds and feeling out their teammates. they're having those moments, but you need to have more time to build those moments with your teammates, because I don't think that these guys are really the guys that win games for Pitt, but they can be the guys that lose or not lose games for Pitt when those key moments can happen. Because, like, one thing that I think that Pitt had going for it at the end of the first half against Duke was they took a lead with Jamarius Burton on the bench.
Right.
And that was a huge boost for them. They didn't finish well in that game, but that was a good moment for them. There's going to be points this season where Blake Hinson and Fetty got to ride pine because of fouls. It's already happened a few times this year, and it's going to happen again. It's just the nature of basketball. You need those two twins and Nate Santos to be able to be ready for those moments, to just hold the fort. Don't let the other team go on a run. Maybe get a run of your own, but play solid basketball so that when the starters and the stars of this team get back on the court, they've lost no ground, and now the other team's in trouble because they're rested.
Yeah, moving forward, just to kind of tie a bow on the twin talk here. I think Jorge's the guy that it's been established that he's going to play at the 5 when Fetty gets in foul trouble, and Fetty hasn't been getting he didn't get in foul trouble against Georgia Tech, so that's why we didn't see him. And then on the other end, Guillermo is the guy that they're going to play with Fetty as like a stretch 4, and if they want to use maybe Blake at the 3 a little bit and get a little more creative. And add some size, but still have a versatile 5 out there on the floor. I think that's what we could see them do moving forward here. So John wants to know, would it be a smart move, speaking of Georgia Tech's game, would it be a smart move for Capel to insert Nike Sabande into the starting lineup in place of Greg Elliott until Greg recovers from his shooting woes? I wrote about it for the preview. I believe Greg Elliott was 8 of 19 in his last 5 games from 3-point range entering Georgia Tech, and I think he was 0 for 3 against the Yellow Jackets from behind the arc as well. So it's just been a cold streak. He hasn't shot the ball well. I think he finished with 5 points. Actually, I have the numbers right here. Probably should just look at them. Yeah, he finished one of 7 from the field. So he didn't even attempt a shot in the second half against Georgia Tech. So yeah, I mean, the guy's cold right now. There's no denying it. I do still think that Greg Elliott is the best pure shooter on this team when he's hot. And I think that's why you keep him in the starting lineup and you keep Nike in his role as 6th man, because it's working out. I think the best role for Nike Sabande on this team is coming off the bench and giving Pitt that second wave of scoring. Chris, do you agree?
No, I agree. You need that energy. You need that boost. And here's the thing is that when Nike's coming off the bench and not getting in foul trouble, people forget he's 6'4".
Yeah.
Jamarius Burton is dangerous because Jamarius is explosive and big. Like he can beat a bigger guy to a spot, and he can plow over a smaller guy and post them up and work them. Nike Sabande can do that, but I'd say Nike's a much better shooter from outside than JB. Oh, yeah. So like he presents a serious threat that you could bring off the bench, and that the other team can just be like, great, we got to account for that. And the thing is, like, I don't think Greg's not giving them terrible minutes. I think the problem is he's not shooting, he's not hitting the shots that he's designed to hit. But if Greg can hit for them, it brings so much more to the table. So I think that it allows them to space a bit better. And we've seen when he has hit in games, they've been a really dangerous team. And then again, when you're bringing Nike Sabande off, you can bring him in and let JB run point. You could bring him and he can run point. If you wanted to give Nelly Cummings a break, or he could take over for Jamarius' spot. I think Greg's in a unique position with what he does. But it makes sense. Now, I will say this: if I wouldn't be surprised if we see that switch come later in the season at some point, just because Jeff sees a matchup that they really like. But I think right now Pitt's at the right pace. They could keep doing the right things. And you did a great job covering the fact that Nike was like, I don't take his spot. Let's keep the pace going. He's content with where he's at as far as getting minutes. He's just about winning, and that's what Jeff Capel keeps saying: being consumed with winning. So I think that this is a very good thing for Pitt, that they kind of have that situation right now.
I mean, yeah, Nike played 34 minutes against Georgia Tech. I don't care if you're a starter or not. I mean, He played less than there was only less than 5 minutes of the entire game where he wasn't on the floor. So he's still finding a big role. And Greg Elliott is still a productive player. I mean, he was still a
Yeah.
+5 in his 24 minutes out on the floor for Pitt. So, he's not doing the thing that he does normally best, which is shoot well from the outside. But he still is helping ball movement. He's great on the defensive end still, I think. Probably one of the better backcourt defenders Pitt has. And he's an energy guy. I mean, he hustles. He's one of the first guys you see diving on the floor for a loose ball. All of those things are still really important. And if you look, I agree wholeheartedly with your point you made, Chris, about if they're going to make this switch, it needs to come later, because these are the games where you break your slump. Games against Louisville, games against Florida State. I mean, they have, after that, next week, they have some decently tough games against Wake Forest and Miami. But after that, I mean, they play Boston College later in the year. They play at Florida State again. Those are the games where, you finally break through and gain that confidence back, and you get into a rhythm. And we've seen other guys struggle to find that rhythm. Nelly Cummings, to start the year, was horrible at shooting the basketball, but he improved. Jamarius Burton had struggles a little bit early in the season. I think that was more injury related, but still, it's a long year. Guys are going to have their ups and downs. Greg's currently struggling right now, but I think it says a lot that A, Nike stood up for his teammate and said, no, you need to keep starting him. And B, Capel realized that, that is what's best for the team. We can still win with Nike coming off the bench. So Victor wants to know, as we move on, say Pitt wins 18 to 20 games but misses the NCAA tournament. Is that enough to keep Capel off the hot seat for a couple of years, or would he still need to do equally well or better than that next year? I don't know. I mean, I think I'll let you start, Chris.
I have mixed feelings about this, because I do think that if I said this on the Christmas episode of this show, I think this team can make the tournament. I think they absolutely can, and I think they're continuing to show that they can. If they miss it, there's going to be some disappointing losses that people are going to that's going to stick with people, and it's going to beg the question, should that be the thing there? But I think what Jeff Capel's shown in the way they've started this season is that players can buy in and they can win. This basketball team can win games, and this basketball program can win games. And especially if, say, this happens and they keep the guys that they're supposed to keep. Jalen Lowe just got nominated for the McDonald's All-American team. One of their 4-star guys. They got Carlton Carrington. They got guys coming in the next couple of years. Dior Johnson, if he sticks around. Blake Henson, if he sticks around.
John
Federico,
Hugley,
if he sticks around. John Hugley, if he's there's the making of a team. If this team is competitive and just misses the tournament this year, I have a hard time saying, blow that up with the recruits they have coming in. Now, if they lose that, and then you see a lot of these guys start to decommit, that'll change the situation. But I think these players believe in what they're building right now. I think that Jeff Capel is kind of showing that he's just had a really raw deal first, rebuilding the entire program from the situation that Kevin Stallings had. I mean, I've talked about this before, but Noah, when Kevin Stallings was there, when they watched film, they watched it in recliners. They didn't. Yeah. They didn't do normal basketball things. It was very bizarre. So Jeff Capel had to rebuild so much of it just to get them back to just operating normally, and then they had to get back to playing normally, and then COVID hit. And again, these aren't excuses. These aren't saying that Pitt shouldn't have done better, but it's just acknowledging, do you want to get rid of a guy who might just now be figuring it out now that things have been normal for a little bit? When that's happening. And again, they're doing this in a year when the two guys that were supposed to carry this program this year were John Hugley and Dior Johnson, and neither of them have been there. I think that this shows that Jeff Capel should be around for at least a little bit longer to see how these next couple of years play out, at least.
Yeah, I think the only thing that gets Jeff Capel fired in the next couple of seasons, I don't think there's anything that'll get him fired. I don't want to say anything. There are certain things that will definitely get you fired, but anything court related, there's not much that will get him canned after this year, just because they've taken such a big step forward compared to where they were the last couple of seasons. I think something that could get him fired in the immediate future, or not immediate future, but in the next couple of years, would be if we saw something happen similar to what occurred in the 2020-21 season, where the team fell apart and like what you alluded to, Carter, like all the good talent left. If that were to happen again, it just might be like, look, man, once was tough, twice is a trend. If you lose all your recruits and all the talent on your roster, those would be the only things to keep him around, regardless of how the team does in the next 13 games of the regular season this year. Is the future is bright. And even if they miss the tournament this season, you can make an argument that they're going to be even more talented next year, even without Nelly Cummings and Jamarius Burton and Nike Sabande. I mean, they have a chance to have, I think, like 4 or 5 4-star players on their roster next year with Johnson, with Hugley, with the McDonald's All-American kid. I mean, they've got a lot of promise. And granted, that depends on guys sticking around. Who knows if D.R. Johnson will be here? Who knows if John Hugley will be here? And a high school kid's mind could change at any second. Will the Graham twins develop? Will Fetty continue to get better? It's all speculation right now. But I think as far as Jeff Capel's job stability goes, it's probably the highest it's been, and I'd argue his entire time at Pitt.
Yeah, other than when he first signed, because he was going to get time to fix the Kevin Stallings situation there. I agree. Like they're playing good basketball and they're saying the right things. Like I think that there's that we could put a bigger emphasis on that across the board. Like when these guys are winning games, they're just staying focused. Like they're not out here trying to say, ridiculous things.
Pitt is back.
Like, Pitt is back. And some of them weren't even ridiculous. Like, Pitt felt like they were back when they were 8-2 and they'd just beaten Duke. And then they fell off a cliff because they lost focus and there was some locker room problems that happened there as far as those guys that existed. But, you're getting a chance to set the tone. And this is what I have said has been the goal for Jeff Capel for a few years now. I think the biggest problem that he had with the crew, and I know this is, spinning off from just this team, but I think one of the biggest problems that he had was when he brought in a really good, talented class. They had Xavier Johnson, Audis Toney, the other guy who played like Xavier Johnson. His name escapes me.
Trey McGowan's.
Thank you. Yes. Trey McGowan. That was their team. There was no vet from the Kevin Stallings days who was able to say, yo, young blood, like, fall in line. Mm-hmm. They ran the show. And then when McGowan's left and eventually Champagny came in, Johnson and Toney were like, hey, we run the show. And I don't think that they ever learned about deference and how to establish that kind of culture in the program. And then so when they left and Justin Champagny went to the NBA, that put, I think that left Jeff Capel with, well, I got to start all over again.
Right.
And he had to go get a guy like Jamarius Burton in the portal, and they had to start building that way. And now in a year's time, he has found the vets that are able to say, hey, follow us. Blake Hinson, Nelly Cummings, Jamarius Burton sticking around. I think that's huge.
Nike sticking around.
Nike sticking around. Yeah. You get guys like that to stick around, and you bring in a Greg Elliott. It sets a tone. So now, the young guys that are on right now, Fetty, Nate, the twins, if Blake can stick around, if John can stick around, when Jalen Lowe, Carlton Carrington, and Marlon Barnes, all who've now signed with Pitt, by the way, if all of them come in and that culture sticks around next year, they're not looking to establish anything. These are young guys, and Dior Johnson as well, since he'll have kind of been around. It'll be like, hey, this is the style of basketball that we need to play. Fall in line, get with it. And then that's what good basketball programs do, is even in today's basketball where a lot of guys just jump to the NBA or jump in the transfer portal, there's certain guys that they're able to keep, that establish and keep a culture and pass it down. And that's how you stay competitive. That's what Jamie Dixon did for so long. That's what Jeff Capel's trying to do. Again, if you axe them, if you get rid of them, you got to restart that process all over again. And you don't know if the next guy is going to bring you what you're getting right now.
Who's the only team in the ACC in the last decade that's consistently competed with North Carolina and Duke?
Pitt?
No, Virginia. And the way, what? No, I was going to say, and the reason Virginia is able to win, it has a style of play it commits to, and it has guys that buy into that style of play and they buy into the program. I mean, Clark has been playing for Virginia since I was in third grade.
Hey, Clark. Jeez.
He has been there forever. Yeah, he was on their national championship team. Yep. That was before a global pandemic occurred. It's just crazy. And that's how Pitt's going to have to win. Pitt's never going to be a program that can get 5 stars. And if it is, I mean, that would be crazy because Capel has shown the ability to get 5 stars. But when he got those 5 stars, he had a blue D on his quarter zip, which did a little something, I think, to help him out. But they can get talent. The Panthers can get talent, but it's getting that talent to stick around for 2-3 seasons. That's what's going to allow Pitt to be a regular contender again. Maybe not as committed as the guys were in the Jamie Dixon era because the transfer portal exists now and they don't necessarily play the same style of basketball as they did in the ACC or in the Big East days. But that type of buy-in that you see out of Virginia where you don't even have to play the same style of basketball, but buy into how the program operates and buy into the success, that's how you become a top-tier competitor in the ACC moving forward if you're Pitt.
Absolutely. Great example of Tony Bennett, by the way.
Final question here. We got 2 things going on at once. So let me get this off here. Anthony wants to know, were either of you surprised by Dante Cephas choosing Penn State over Pitt? And who are some other receivers that are still in the portal that Pitt can go after? Carter, you want to start us off here?
I wasn't too surprised because, I had heard rumblings that Dante Cephas was considering Penn, of course, local guy and everything. But, Penn State's a heck of a program. Yeah. And they bring things to the table that Pitt can as far as the numbers that they bring to their games. The money that the NIL money from what I understand that goes around at Penn State is on a different level than what Pitt can bring to the table right now. But by and large, I think it's also part of just where you are at Pitt with the transition of things. If Kenny Pickett was still your quarterback, sure, you probably would have won this battle. But you got a new transfer quarterback after your last transfer quarterback didn't go so well in an offense that was designed to be about the run. I get Dante Cephas saying this right now, and I know Pitt fans don't like don't like hearing that in Penn State and unrivaled and all this stuff between them. They're rivals. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah. But I think it's something that stings for Pitt fans, but it's part of the business. And I think that Pitt's going to go out there. They're going to look at guys like Dejon Reynolds, who was at what was it, Pitt?
The Clemson game.
The Pitt Clemson game, which is a really good environment, I thought, to bring a football player to. We also talked to Phil Dracovic there. And Ty Diefenbach.
I was going to say, don't forget about Ty. He was the most talkative out of anyone in the group.
Yeah, he was that young man sounded ready to come to work. Yeah. But that being said, like they're still working. They're still looking to bring guys in. But I think it's part of the system when you have a rough passing year and you need to lead on the run game. Receivers are going to look at that in the portal and be like, let me go where somewhere where maybe they'll find a better way to use me. But that's not to say that Pitt can't use receivers better next year. I think Phil Dracovic, he could still, if he blows up with Kadante Mumfield and Bub Means and Gavin Bartholomew, maybe he gets more looks. Maybe Pitt starts getting more of those types of receivers. And I think it's also going to be interesting to see, you get guys like Zion Fowler and all the 3-star guys at this class. How do they develop in the next couple of years? And then, you're going to have Day Farmer in 2 years, who's a 4-star guy. If he sticks on the, to his commit, they're going to have time. I think it's a little painful for Pitt fans now, but I think it shouldn't be a doom and gloom situation just yet.
Yeah, I did expect him to go to Pitt just based upon everything I heard. But I mean, when you break it down, Penn State is going to be a top 5 team in the country next season, just with all the talent it returns. And if you're Dante Cephas, which one would you rather go to? Exactly. A team that won 11 games last year, that won the Rose Bowl, and has a 5-star quarterback starting under center next season, or a team that's had its 3rd quarterback in 3 years now? I mean, I think Dracovic will be a better quarterback than what Slovis was this past fall, but Penn State seems to be the better option if you're taking objectivity, or if you're looking at it objectively. And I get why both teams were in need of a number 1 receiver. I think Cephas recognized that. I do think he looked things over, and everyone said, he wants to play close to home. Well, Kent State's 2 hours away from Pittsburgh. Penn State's like 2 hours or less away from Pittsburgh. So his family's still going to be able to make the drive and go see him play. And he's going to go in there and be a top contributor on a team that can compete not for an ACC championship or another conference championship. They're going to be in the national title conversation next year. They're going to be up there. I think highly of Penn State as far as what it has to offer in 2023, and adding Cephas to the mix is only going to make them more dangerous. But yeah, as far as replacements, Dejon Reynolds is like the top guy in the portal right now that Pitt still has an offer extended to and hasn't signed. They targeted 5 other guys in the portal: Cephas, who went from Kent State to Penn State; Jack Beach, who went from LSU to TCU; our guy Dakotas Crawford committed over the weekend, Carter, and that was a tough blow. Went from Nebraska to Louisiana Tech. Andrell Anthony, the Michigan receiver, went to Oklahoma. And a guy that I was really interested in, Tyrone Broden, the 6'7" receiver from Bowling Green, went to Arkansas. So those are 5 losses right there. I'm not sure how much of a chance Pitt had with the other 4 guys compared to Cephas, who I know they were really in on. But Reynolds, like you said, he was on campus for a big weekend for Pitt. And he has a teammate that transferred to Pitt with McMillan coming here. So that could be a big pickup, because he was a guy who played meaningful minutes for the Gators last year. So that could be a big pickup. And if not, they're going to have to, there's still high school players that can be signed, and they'll have to figure it out. You know, it's not the only time that Pitt's ever going to have to deal with replacing a guy like a top production guy like Jared Wayne. And they're just going to have to say, next man up. That's just how college football works sometimes. The transfer portal only existed for a couple years. There were many, many, many seasons prior to 2020 where you couldn't just get that immediate fix through another college program. You had to rely on guys you're developing. So, Carter, that's all I got. You have any final comments here as we wrap up today's show?
Just finishing that point that you were making. Jordan Addison came out of nowhere for Pitt. Yeah. Like he was a 3-star guy who looked really good, and then clicked with Kenny Pickett at that point. I'm not saying that guy will emerge this year. It's definitely on the roster, but I wouldn't put it past Pitt to have the possibility for a player to spark at the receiver position. It happens a lot. But also, Konate Mumpfield, I think that he's a really good separator. I don't think Keaton Slovis really figured out how to use him well enough this past year. I think Pitt will still have their chances to develop those guys, and just, again, give it time, Pitt fans. I think that they'll find their guys. The biggest question will be, can Phil Dracovic get things going, and can that run game still be a huge factor? If it is, I think Pitt's going to be another competitive ACC team again.
And they could throw the ball more to the tight end too. That could always work as well.
Also.
Yeah, so hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Be sure to keep those questions coming. We appreciate everyone who reaches out to us through email or Twitter DM. Keep those coming, and keep tuning in. We'll have another Pitt mailbag for you next week here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. Take care.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.